Are you about to quit a great job over a temporary problem? Or is your manager quietly ruining your mental health? Because step 4 might just save your paycheck. Next on It's Chaile Time. Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of It Is Chaile Time, and this is part 2. It's quite odd. This is part 2 in a 3-week series where we actually deal with toxic leadership. Now, in the first episode, we learned how to identify toxic leadership, and then we continued with part 1 in how to deal with toxic leadership. With other words, your line manager or your boss, There's a bit of a toxicity in the workplace. Maybe it's because of the culture. Sometimes there's a toxic organizational culture, but often it's not a culture itself, it's just a personality of an individual. And today is part 2. So last week at part 1, we look at practical examples out of the career of both myself and my colleague Tsepo Kanama, and we gave some illustrations in terms of how we dealt with it. But today we're going to look at part 2, and we're looking at 6 steps that I have identified how to assist you when you have a line manager who's a bully. A line manager or manageress who's got a toxic leadership style that is edging on bullying you, victimizing you, feeding on your emotion, your defenselessness, and that obviously has an impact on your mental health and also your career. But before we get there, don't forget our massive yearly conference, the HR conference for the Harmony People Network, is on us, 10th of September, Wine Estate, Kiewitzkroon. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. A lot of people have booked, so can't wait. I'm counting the sleep on my fingers already. And I'm introducing to you our next keynote speaker, Jarmaine Lawrence. He's a senior HR business partner at Canon South Africa, and he will be speaking on artificial intelligence and leadership cognition. Let's take a watch.
If you had told me 5 years ago that I'd one day ask a computer for advice before presenting at a conference, I probably would have laughed. Yet here I am. And if we're honest, many of us are doing exactly the same thing. We ask AI to write, analyze, summarize, create, and even challenge our thinking. AI hasn't just become another piece of technology. It has quietly become another voice influencing the decisions we make every day. I am Jarmaine Lawrence Mano, one of the senior HR business partners for Canon South Africa, and I will be speaking at the Harmony People Network, From Good to Great, the HR conference, the intelligent HR revolution. AI has and is changing the way we work, the way we make decisions, and ultimately the way we lead. But as AI becomes more intelligent, an important question emerges. Will AI replace leadership, or will it redefine what great leadership looks like? Because at the end of the day, AI can inform decisions, but only people can inspire change. So let us inspire change at this year's From Good to Great conference in September, held at the Kiewitzkroon Wine Estate. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Bye.
Okay, so what are the 6 steps in how to deal with a toxic boss or toxic leadership? Your line manager seems to be predatory. He or she is victimizing you, bullying you. Now, there's a bit of a disclaimer. These are not only 6 steps. These are steps that I have identified in my career and principles that I've applied and principles I've actually observed other professionals used in order to navigate the often very challenging workplace environment. So here it goes. Step one, define unacceptable conduct. Okay, so define unacceptable conduct. So in this step, I think it is important for us as an employee per se to identify when is a situation of facts, a situation of operational or logistical control, or a service that you need to provide to a customer or to a client, and you have failed the requirements of the company. So when is it a real business rationale behind the behavior of your line manager? When is it because it emanates and flows out of a toxic environment or toxic leadership style? So here it is important for us to differentiate between two elements of leadership when it comes to a situation in the workplace. The one is, let's identify a situation of tough leadership. This is tough leadership. Now, tough leadership is not necessarily toxicity in the workplace, okay? At the end of the day, the workplace is a challenging environment where you have the interests of capital, you have the interests of labor, and there are many other stakeholders. There are the banks, your lenders, your shareholders, your clients, your service providers. So you can naturally understand that in any company does face challenges on a day-to-day basis, okay? And often than other, you will have meetings between your staff and the managers, and people will sometimes be shouting and so, but when is it a legitimate concern, or when is it because the line manager don't know how to actually manage people effectively? So tough leadership, here's a bit of a note on how to identify tough leadership. Tough leadership typically sets high standards, okay? It will give you harsh but constructive feedback, and it pushes you to grow. But it's not personal. It's not necessarily abusive. It's not victimizing or bullying you. Okay. On the other hand, you get toxic leadership. What is toxic leadership? This is where a line manager will typically move the goalpost, give contradictory instructions, but a person gives feedback with the idea of demeaning another person rather than developing that person. So this is, broadly speaking, how you can identify between a real organizational issue, okay, and a toxic leader in terms of your line manager. The toxic leader seems to feed on emotion. It feeds on incompetence. It feeds on defensiveness, tears, because they are making their management style about the person, not the facts of the job or the KPIs that must be affected. Some categories of unacceptable conduct. I have identified 3 categories of unacceptable conduct by a toxic leader. The one is the belittler, okay? The belittlers, okay? This person is always shouting, swearing, using insulting language, publicly humiliating other people during meetings and group chats. WhatsApp? They love insulting people. They love humiliating people, specifically individuals. They will even call you by names. So they are a typical character of such a person is somebody who belittles other people. And I have found that a lot in corporate in my career of, 30 odd years or so. You will from time to time deal with a fantastic manager, but on other occasions you will deal with a manager that makes this management engagement, this relationship, extremely personal, okay? The second category that I've identified that is true of such an individual is they are typically boundary breakers, okay? They're demanding immediate replies to non-urgent tasks. And they will typically send you email 11 o'clock in the evening on weekends, or they will demand that you do work for them while you are on leave. And they often ask you inappropriate personal questions. So this kind of person, they love giving you more and more and more work, but they don't have respect for your personal boundaries. With other words, on weekends when you're off, and they will WhatsApp you, send you messages, phone you, give you work to do. And I actually have a client like that, and his senior management often complains to me that this, this guy, he never sleeps. This owner of the business, he almost worked like 24 hours a day. I think he gets like 2-3 hours sleep a night maybe. And you can be on a Christmas dinner, you can be at an event, on a personal event on a Saturday evening. He will phone you any time of the day or night and say, listen, meet me here at this branch now, or whatever the case may be. And he just demands that, okay? They have no respect for your personal time, for your personal life, for your family, your friends, and the fact that you also need a bit of me time. So that's the second element that categorizes this kind of person, they break boundaries. The third element, the third category of this type of personality is what I call the ghost supervisor. The ghost supervisor. This kind of manager typically demands to be CC'd on every single email because they need control. Okay, they love micromanaging. Okay, they will typically change any task or project requirement on the last minute, and if there are any failures, they will blame you. Okay. They will say when there's a mistake or something happened, they will typically say they've never agreed to something, but they clearly did agree to it, okay? And they will also take credit for the work that you've done, and they will do this in front of the executives, Manco, Exco, or their peers, I call them the ghost supervisor. They love changing boundaries, and they love blaming you for it, and when things go wrong, they love taking the credit for it. They love control. In my personal experience dealing with this kind of character, if you can put it that way, um, you know, everything you do, you need to report back. Every email you send, you need to CC them in, because typically they are also incompetent to a certain degree. And when they are getting interviewed or asked questions by higher up management, they typically don't know because they're not present, that they're not here in the now. So they need to be informed by email or WhatsApp so that they are always abreast of latest developments in the business. Which on the face of it can appear to be correct, but the reality of the matter is they're not in the trenches. They don't really involve and engage themselves. They just on a superficial level want to maintain control. And I'm sure you know exactly who I'm referring to, because you will probably be able to identify some of those kind of personalities also. Okay, so the second point, setting boundaries. Okay, setting boundaries. Here I have some bad news for you. Many of us believe that when there are toxicity in the workplace, that it is the responsibility of HR or company to deal with it, to change that. That is the expectation. So let me manage your expectation here, okay? Even though what you say is true, at the end of the day, the management of a company, as part of their responsibilities, is to mitigate risk in the business, to manage their own liabilities, and part of that is to create a healthy workplace culture. Absolutely. But you as the individual, if you're going to walk around thinking, or asking yourself the question, when will management ever change the culture or ever dismiss that line manager or see what's really going on? You must think again. Let me manage your expectation. Setting boundaries, and I'm talking about boundaries for yourself now, okay? It's not about changing your manager's personality, but about controlling you in how you respond. It's about how you respond to the toxic leadership style. So it is not about you changing the personality of your boss, okay? So the purpose of boundary management is to teach people how to treat you. So you have a responsibility. Wherever you go in life, I suppose, in your family, when you're a sibling, you have other siblings, okay? You guys contest with one another through time, and you effectively teach others what to do and what not to do as they relate to you, okay? The same in the workplace. You can't just pitch up and do the work and think everything is now happy, okay? You need to be aware that you'll have a responsibility to deal with politics also, as an example, okay? People approach the workplace, oh, I don't have time for politics. Well, let me tell you, where there's two or more people in a room, that there's politics, you know? You need to manage that. But also, you need to accept the responsibility to actually manage your relationship, okay? So when you have somebody that is easy to go with, okay, there's a certain way you respond to that person, but there's a very certain way of how to respond to a toxic leader, your line manager that keeps on maybe victimizing or predating on you, or so on. There's actually a cool saying: if you don't build a fence, don't blame your neighbor for walking on your grass. It just goes to show that you have a responsibility to manage others in terms of how they treat you. But how do you do that, okay? So when your manager texts you at 9 o'clock in the evening about a non-urgent task, what do? Do you accept it and create a precedent that it's acceptable? Or are you saying, I want to make sure this gets my full attention. I will dive into this first thing tomorrow morning. Boundary. Obviously, if it's urgent, okay, you must also now read between the lines here. If it is urgent and it must be done, then obviously get on it, okay? But if it is something that's not urgent and this manager's got the tendency to infringe on your private time, okay, that is a typical response whereby you set the boundary. I want to make sure this gets my full attention. I will dive into this first thing in the morning, okay? When your manager dump volumes of work on you, so sometimes you are overworked, you've got so much work to do, and then this manager will keep on giving you work. And you know what? Some managers with toxic leadership styles, they do this specifically to burn you out and to try to find fault with you when you are struggling to cope, okay? So here you can say, for instance, I can absolutely take on this task. To ensure quality, which of my current tasks should I deprioritize to accommodate this? Actually, my assistant yesterday did this trick on me. She's sitting here laughing now. Because we've got a client and we have suddenly a lot of paperwork to do, but like really a lot, you know. And I was out of town and I phoned her, did a WhatsApp video call, and I asked her, listen, is the office working on this? It's going to take a long time, a couple of days, probably a week or two or so. We need to get on this. And she very calmly asked me, okay, so what other jobs mustn't I do so I can pay attention to that? And I was just like, shut up, man. But it's important. But look at this sentence. I can absolutely take on the task. It is not a negative, like, oh, you always pick on me. It's a positive response. I can absolutely take on this task to ensure quality. Which of my other tasks should I deprioritize so I can give attention to this matter at hand? When your boss, for instance, scream or swear, you can respond with, I am fully open to constructive feedback, but can we talk about this in a calm and in a professional manner? You see how you start putting boundaries there. And you may sit there and think, oh, my boss will never accept this. Maybe so. Maybe your boss won't accept this. But the point is, you still have the responsibility of maintaining sanity. Okay? You've got the responsibility in what is the message that comes across when people engage with you. Okay? And here's a psychological trick. And this trick bloody works. I'm telling you. It may sound dry, okay, but it works. It's actually called the grey rock approach. And I've, to some extent, practiced this myself. But I want to use two examples of two managers that I can recollect in corporate that were fantastic with this, okay? So what is the grey rock approach? It's a psychological method in dealing with toxic managers. Act as uninteresting and boring. Now, I know that sounds counterproductive. Strictly stick to business, give no emotional responses, and do not share any personal details of your life. There's a reason for that. Now, I understand this reason because I also have a very psychological approach to my relationships. I'm a bit of an influencer. So I understand that if you want to influence people, there must be some kind of emotional connection between people. Toxic predatory leaders typically feed off those they can make an emotional connection with, who, out of fear, subject emotionally to them. Okay? It is very difficult for toxic leaders to abuse and take advantage of people that are uninterested and emotionally distant. You will typically be tempted, and this is a temptation, I know, okay? And I've been there myself, okay? You won't necessarily believe it, but I'm a bit of an introvert by nature. So even though in my career it's a bit of a confrontational work, I actually shy away from confrontation. I actually don't like it. So I face this temptation regularly, whereby when you sit with a toxic leader, you are tempted to give in, to be a bit emotional, and always to be agreeing, to always pacify, sorry, 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 to always be apologizing, just so that you can be in that person's good favors. You're overcompensating to be in that person's good favors or in his good books. That's not the way to do it, because I'm telling you now, they're going to keep on victimizing and bullying you. For instance, if there's a group meeting, things go wrong, his job is on the line, he will look at the group, but somehow when you have to single out people that look at you, why? Because you've always opened that door to them. Now, I want to give two examples of two managers in this regard I think was brilliant. And the one is a technical manager. At some point in Johannesburg, I was the senior branch manager of a business. And we had like 150 staff in that branch. And this individual was a technical manager. He was a lovely man, a great guy, but he's not very pleasant in a work environment to be around with, because he's dry, man. Yes. He doesn't get emotional. When you ask him, good morning, how are you doing? Fine. That's it. And he also speaks a bit softer. He doesn't raise or elevate his tone, his volume. So he doesn't get excited emotionally. And he never smiles. He's not unfriendly. He's brilliant at what he does. But you can't read him. So he's got a straight face. If you call him, he comes. If you tell him to do this and do that, he always does it. No issue with the work. But he's not going to talk to you about his wife. He's not going to talk to you about his children. He's not going to talk to you about his life, what he does over weekends. He's just dry. So there's no emotional connection. So for me to victimize the individual or to bully a person, I need to get through emotion, and I must have that connection, that emotional connection. And psychologically, me as the predator, I must sense that this person is emotionally subjecting itself or himself or herself to me. Then the scene has been set. Then I can start victimizing. I can start swearing because the person is accepting that. I can start bullying, and I can start making unreasonable demands. That's typically the psychological makeup of the predator here, the toxic leader. So the key there is to cut yourself emotionally. Stick to business, okay? And I remember one day, so of all the staff, through time, I've given many warnings and put in hearings and dismissed staff from time to time, as it may be. But this individual, throughout the years I was there, I gave him one warning. And even that warning, he appealed, and very calmly, without getting emotionally involved, without accusing us of anything, he just stated the facts, and the warning was withdrawn. So I lost that battle, if you can put it that way, okay? But here's the interesting thing. I'm not a toxic leader by nature, okay? So we maintained a professional relationship. It had no bearing on me, on my emotions, on my ego whatsoever, the fact that the warning was drawn. It was for me a non-issue whatsoever. He was still a lovely person, still a fantastic man, great father, in terms of what you can see on Facebook and whatever, but he will never tell you personally, So that was the one example. And then there's another example. I was a supervisor at another company, and we had the manager. I actually can't remember his name, but yes, if you think this other guy was dry, this guy took it to a new level. This guy, I don't think he has any emotions. He was just dead. I mean, If you ask him how you're doing, I don't even think you will get an answer. He will just look at you. He doesn't speak personal stuff, or he doesn't do small talk whatsoever. For him, it was about the work. And even with the owners of the business, it is dry, man. But you know what? He did his job. Okay? So with a guy like that, there is no room for shouting and screaming and abusing and belittling, whatever the case may be. So if he's in a room with meetings or so, the owner is not going to pick on him. He's not a pick on me type, okay? And it's because some of these people, they've learned this lesson of not opening yourself up emotionally. Don't try to subject yourself emotionally to the person to the extent whereby you start getting into your personal life and allowing that person then to take advantage of you. So even though I've later in my life started learning this lesson by being emotionally a bit distant to certain characters, during the early years of my career, I opened my emotions wide up and I was subject to abuse. So that is a grey rock approach. Then step number 3, de-escalate the situation. Very important, de-escalate the situation. Okay, so it is unavoidable to find yourself in a explosive situation. You may be in a group meeting, your line manager called the meeting and all the staff is maybe in a room or so. They're having a meeting and they start swearing, they start screaming, okay? Maybe sometimes they start insulting or sometimes they start picking on individuals. But now here is the thing. It is extremely important, because you are going to find those situations from time to time. It's extremely important that you de-escalate the situation. Don't aggravate the situation. Now, you need to remember that toxic leadership, okay, they feed on emotional responses. They feed on responses such as fear, defensiveness, and tears. It somehow feeds their sense of control. So if you're the individual in that group, okay, in that scene, that theater, okay, you become defensive. Then the line of attack is going to be on you. If you're the one starting to cry, okay, or if there's a sense that you are fearful, that individual is going to start feeding on you, because somehow when you're a toxic leader, when you're a predator, and this is true, you know that, okay, whether you are, suppose, a shark in the ocean or a lion at the Kruger National Park, the predators will always sense the fear of the prey. And you know what, humans, it's the same. So it is very convenient for a toxic leader, when there's a group meeting, it's difficult to bully the collective. Okay, but if the eyes can focus on an individual, this is all psychological. If they can start focusing on an individual, you'll start finding that person is now targeting that person, attacking that person. So it is important, okay, that you learn some tools on how to deal with this. Okay, so the one element is, or the one tactical tool you need to learn is what is called a tactical pause. Okay. So when the manager attacks, don't attack immediately, okay? Wait for about 3 seconds, okay? And then answer out of a composed emotion, okay? Do not show emotion. Maintain your composure. And at the end of the day, if you just wait for like 3 seconds before you answer, it actually breaks the momentum. A bit of a dotted line example, I typically, when I do labor law training, for instance, one of the elements of advice I give them when they go under cross-examination in a hearing, for instance, or even at arbitration. If you're not the employee in the hearing on arbitration and you want to have a little bit of a tactical advantage, just get yourself an interpreter. Because now, in terms of cross-examination, okay, so the whole idea is to try to put pressure on the person you're busy cross-examining. And sometimes a technique is to ask questions very quickly, one after another. Sometimes it's a tactic to raise your voice a bit or so. But if you have an interpreter, everything runs through the interpreter. It breaks the momentum of the cross-examiner. But the same technique here. If you're in a group meeting and your manager is starting to become abusive, okay, before you respond, take a deep breath, count 3, okay, and then compose your emotions and answer the facts of the question, okay. When you do answer, and here's a bit of a second technique, okay, it's called projection. Remember, a predator, a toxic leader enjoys controlling the individual. You need to make the situation and projecting it onto the group. It's very difficult. Yes, I can just think of lessons also again in nature. It's very difficult for a lion to attack a group of wildebeests. They will always highlight or single out one individual, the weaker one, the one that may be sick or whatever the case may be. It's the same here. Humans are, from a psychological perspective, work in the same way. If there's a group, they want to focus on the one. When you respond, you count your 3 seconds, be composed, but then say things like, you are right, we need to address a certain matter. Or let us focus on this right now to make sure our client get the quickest possible service. So you don't say, I will. Move away from I to us or I to we. We must focus on this. Let us make sure we get our act together, okay? So that is how you project the problem away from you to the group, okay? And it's become more difficult for a toxic leader than to start pinpointing you, because now suddenly it's everybody involved. And then the third tool here is actually agree with the facts, okay? If your manager shouts that we are not focusing or giving good service to a client, okay, rather say you are right. The client needs better support. Let us focus to sort out the client right now. Don't say things like, but you never told me. Or you said you told me about this, but you didn't tell me, okay? Don't confront, okay? Agree with the facts. Don't agree with the emotion. Agree with the facts. So what do we have so far? And also, there are things you must not do, okay? Don't tell your manager to calm down. It's not going to work. It's going to aggravate the matter. Do not match their volume or their tone. And please, don't over-apologize. If you have to apologize, apologize, but don't keep on sucking up, okay? Because you're not creating this emotional connection. You're opening the door for that person to take advantage of you, and you're creating a precedent. Okay, so where are we standing so far? Step 1, define unacceptable conduct, okay? Step 2, setting boundaries, very important. Step 3, de-escalate the situation. And now we're getting to step 4. And this is important because this is the one that can actually save your paycheck. Maintain objectivity. Okay, in this step, I think it is important that we once again differentiate between a tough job and a toxic culture or a toxic leader. It's critically important that you do not develop a victim mindset, because not every piece of criticism, okay, is necessarily the result of toxic leadership, okay? It may just be a tough day or a very demanding job. Some of us, that our jobs are very demanding, okay? So too many people, and I've mentioned this example last week, but too many people, they throw away great careers, okay? Simply because they don't get praised enough. I had a client like this, a fantastic young man with great ambition and great potential, became the senior financial manager at the company. I mean, he was fairly young, and he eventually quit it. And in his exit interview, let me just drink a cup of coffee here. He literally said because he felt he wasn't praised enough. And I'm like, my goodness, okay, I understand the importance of praise and rewarding people for good work, but this company's culture is actually a fantastic culture, you know. But okay, so the job was also very demanding. So people sometimes throw a demanding job away just because they feel they are not praised enough, okay? But they can't really sometimes differentiate between a work culture, a workplace that is toxic, and a job that is really demanding. So if your manager is upset because of a missed deadline and his criticism is focused on the job, okay, but it is not a personal attack, okay, then this is not toxic leadership, okay? It is just a demanding job scenario. So in the example I used last week, let's go through it again. This person is an HR manager at a massive company in South Africa. He gets a huge salary, like 120,000 in a month or something. But his challenge is, because of the current situation in the company, there are some challenges. The senior management, they are becoming a bit more the shouting type, the screaming type, and I won't be surprised if there's a swear or curse word coming through every now and then. And it seems like they start making a bit more and more demands. And now the person told me he's already polishing his CV. And I'm like, this doesn't sound to me like toxic leadership. You know, you need to be able to maintain objectivity and say, and just divorce yourself from the process a bit and say, listen, is there a toxic culture? Or is this a temporary situation where the company is facing challenges? You will often find that, the company is trying to address matters. I remember there's the Smiling Buddha case. It's a bit of a case law where the judge said that the workplace is not a heavenly garden filled with smiling Buddhas. Everybody, staff, managers, and business owners and executives, we all face pressure, okay? We all are subject to the same level of pressure and challenges in the workplace. So you want to kind of expect there to be challenges. But you can't now just say because your boss criticizes you, okay, or maybe swear at you or whatever, that this is now a toxic leader, okay? Or I'm not praised enough and now I'm going to leave, okay? You need to maintain objectivity, because if you don't, you actually literally start throwing your career away, okay? And some of us got wonderful jobs and careers, and we just sometimes need to stick out, okay? Last week I alluded to, in corporate myself, I've dealt with toxic leadership. I have resigned at one stage, but fortunately my boss convinced me to withdraw my resignation, which I did. I did at one stage found myself puking on the street because of toxic leadership. But eventually I stuck out, and I've stayed in the company for many years later, and eventually the company became very professional, the culture fantastic, and I must say, looking back at this, I found myself much stronger emotionally. I found myself to be able to deal with situations. I do find myself to be able to deal with the politics of the day. And in my career now as a labor law specialist, I find that I can consult better. I know more, and not just know more, I actually feel. I know what people feel and what people are going through. Sometimes you just need to stick it out. And you know what? From an employer perspective, you need those too. You need those employees that, in spite of the treatment sometimes or what is going on in the company, to stick it out, okay? So you will often find that the senior management of a company, a CEO, for instance, these are not just fly-by-nights who started off being a CEO. These are strong people that's been there, that's been around, that got the t-shirt. They know how to run businesses. And we can also take example from some politicians, the president, ex-previous presidents, and so strong people, Sometimes I feel, if I have to go through what those people must go through, I wonder if the country will survive if I was the president. I'm not so sure, okay? But anyway, it's important to maintain objectivity. Not all forms of pressure is necessarily because of toxic leadership. Next point, step 5, getting HR involved. Okay, so unfortunately, there comes a point when a situation must be reported to HR, typically because it may have legal consequences. Okay, so you may be at the point where you may submit a grievance, or you may file an unfair labor practice dispute to the CCMA. You may file a unfair discrimination dispute. You may file a constructive dismissal dispute if you feel that you want to resign. At some point, we get to that stage. So let me help you here. How do you actually deal with this? It is important, firstly, to remember that HR is not your personal therapist, okay? They are there to manage the liability of the company, okay? The HR, yeah, as I said, it's not your therapists. It's not your special place. They're there to help the company. The employer pay them to mitigate their risk, okay? They don't respond typically to my boss is mean, okay? They respond to my manager is creating a hostile work environment that is impacting everyone to do their job successfully. That's what they respond to, okay? So if you're going to go there and complain that my boss is mean, oh well, get a life, okay? So when you approach HR, there are three things that you need to remember. Number one, let them see the risk. So let's assume you're going to submit now a grievance, okay? They need to see the risk. They need to see the liability, okay? Number two, don't go empty-handed. You need to have evidence. You need to show emails. Now, for you to show emails, you need to have we call it in corporate file 13. You need to have your file 13, okay? Where you save and archive relevant emails that sort of demonstrate toxic leadership, okay? So you need to then go and print these emails and show it to them, okay? You need to be able to be factual. You need to list dates, times, witnesses, okay? And then thirdly, you need to demonstrate the harm to the business, okay? What the impact is on you, what's the impact on the others, what's the impact on the department, the productivity of the company, and the consequences, okay? The consequences that may emanate out of this. There may be labor law disputes, maybe at the CCMA, maybe at the labor court. Then HR starts responding, okay? The objective for this approach is really for HR to get involved, to formally investigate and to try to resolve a matter. Why? It's to mitigate any possible fallout or legal liability and negative consequences that may impact the department, the productivity, the people in the company, other stakeholders like society, politics, suppliers, and clients, and so on and so forth. So there comes this time when you may have to get involved, or get HR involved, but don't go empty-handed. You need to demonstrate facts. Then point 6, quitting your job. So yes, up to now, we've really tried to venture in how can we save our jobs, how can we better navigate the workplace environment, how can we actually set boundaries and teach others how to approach us, how to engage with us. Maybe it's advisable to get HR involved, but there comes a time where it's time to quit, maybe to resign, okay? Now, 3 important matters here. Number 1, when a job starts impacting your mental health or your career, it is time to move on, okay? But leave on your own terms, okay? And not on a whim. And try to secure your next role first before you resign, okay? And then very important, this is extremely important, man. Do not burn your bridges or vent during your exit interview. Because there's a saying, what goes around comes around. Now, you don't know what the future may bring. Sometimes you may be a very important manager in a company and you need to do a presentation to a customer and that manager sits in the audience, you see. So do not vent, don't burn bridges. Life is short and we all need positive relationships. Let work stay work and let what happens at the green mile stay at the green mile. That's for this week. 6 steps on how to deal with toxic leadership. Now we have time for job review, fresh vacancies in our networks. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Good morning, everyone. Let's have a look at some of the vacancies posted nationwide on our Harmony Peoples Network this week. First up, a well-established engineering company in Johannesburg is seeking a junior draftsman. Spec Africa is looking for a human resources and industrial officer. Lumina Personnel is hiring an HR manager. And last but not least, Root Sudalwadi Investments has an opening for a qualified and experienced safety officer to promote and maintain a safe working environment by ensuring compliance with all applicable mining legislation, company policies, and safety standards. For the full information of the mentioned positions, how to apply, as well as more available positions, find the vacancy link in the description. You will also find a link to a useful video on how to compose a winning CV and have a successful interview. Tune in again next week for more Harmony vacancies.